The educational facility planning that we have started to conduct internally is in response to the facility conditions, the feedback that we have received from the community, and a look at the educational assessments and the performance. This is just a snapshot from RIDE's report card. There is one of the schools, your newest school is a 4-star school, the others are 3. Although the school facility is not the only driver in school performance, it sometimes is a factor. That's something we will want to be mindful of. And we look at where some of the underperforming students are, what grade level, so that we can see if there's a trend and maybe address that with some facility improvements. Again, facility improvements are not the only driver, but it is a component. And let's say this, we don't want facilities to be a reason why school performance is not optimal. So it's important to understand that the RIDE Stage 1 that we are assembling is intended to document the need for the project. It does not identify a specific project. It does not identify a specific dollar amount, but it does identify the need. In some of our research and development of the project, we probably are developing a series of options. We're at least at 10 already that could be considered in Stage 2 in some capacity as a hybrid, as an option. There are a variety of options that we've started to develop based on what we have learned, and they range in dollar amount from tens of millions to over $100 million. These numbers should not shock anyone. As we mentioned, the Jacobs report alone had $50–70 million worth of deferred maintenance identified. We've come up with the same amount. What's important to keep in mind is that there is an opportune time now with incentives that maximize reimbursement to consider a robust plan that would set Coventry up for the next generation. So, with reimbursement, those large projects start to look at something that's more manageable to the community, that starts at maybe 20 million and goes to 50 or 60 million. So these are conversations that will further be developed in Stage 2, but I did want to bring that to your attention now. So the RIDE Stage 1, the table of contents, what we are developing, there are 12 items. Some of them are simple statements that are made. Some of them are just the collection of data, factual data that the school department has. The most important one is item number 1, which is the statement of interest and project justification. That is the meat and potatoes of the report. Number 2 is just some credential information that you have. The capital facilities improvement plan is a piece that we're working on with Jason. The facilities analysis was our assessment that's been conducted. The demographics will be your enrollment projections from NESDEC. Cross-district due diligence is an exercise that looks at neighboring districts to investigate regionalization. Number 7, educational program due diligence is what we started with the executive committee many months ago, continued on with the planning activities and the community sessions. We will document all that information. Number 9 and number 12 are just procurement statements that identify how you had hired us to perform this work. Number 10, it's a document we'll be working on with Sarah. It's just an operating budget analysis. Number 11 is some documentation to show that we have engaged with National Grid on any incentives that are available to Coventry. So our path forward, we're meeting this evening, January 9th. On January 23rd, we are suggesting that there be school building committee action item, and that's the recommendation to submit the Stage 1 to the school committee. That same evening, there's a school committee action item where they would approve and sign the Stage 1 submission. January 27th is a Coventry Town Council review of the RIDE Stage 1. On February 10th, we do have an action item for the Coventry Town Council to approve and to sign the submission of the Stage 1. And then we will submit that on Friday, February 14th. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I do want to let you know that your staff has been very helpful in putting together this information. They've been very accommodating, and we certainly appreciate that.
Dave, you're first.
Okay.
Any questions, concerns?
My concern's not with you. My concern is, will there be does the full council have to sign this? Or,
I think it's just they have to vote on it and it has to pass, but they don't each have to sign it now. I think Barbie, the chair, the president, maybe.
It asks for a municipal representative.
Could be Ed Wazika.
Edward Zika, okay. That's one question. The other one is, if the council has any concerns about this, or will they still pass it?
Oh, I have no idea.
That's,
I think the building committee, we just had a building committee actually, and we kind of discussed the fact that the Stage 1 does not put any guarantee or commitment of the town side on any of those numbers. So the numbers that Phil just showed us, they're just numbers. It's sort of evidence of the need and some options for them to think about, so that in the future, when we do Stage 2, which is a lot more,
Right.
like at that point, we'll be actually trying to figure out what the town would be willing to bond for. And then that would make the building committee come up with some ideas as to what project we would really want to put our hat on. And then that would be the time for town council support and the community support. That's when the marketing will start taking place. And
that's all I'm trying to do, project any bumps in the road and try to strategize.
yeah, we're gonna. It's gonna be a big project.
That's it. Thank you.
Luke.
No, I think you said it very well. And just so everyone knows, we do have obviously we have the building committee. We did hear the presentation that Phil gave, which that committee provided comment and some suggestions on the approach to presenting to both school committee and council. And I think that, there's always a potential that there'll be rifts in the road. I think we just need to stress yet again that this is a conceptual layout. Stage 2 is much more finite in its approach, and that right now there's no commitment really beyond just saying that we have a need and we'd like to move forward with figuring out how we address that need, correct?
Correct.
So I think hopefully we can get this done by the 14th and everything goes in, and I look forward to Stage 2. So thank you for your work.
I have one question. I didn't ask it at the building committee. And the February 14th date for submission, if for some reason we didn't make that date, is there a hard date with the Department of Ed?
The published date is February 17th.
Okay. So it's,
Our preference would be to submit prior to that
Before
on
that.
the 14th.
I was wondering what the date, yeah.
We will submit the document provided it is approved to be submitted. It is not uncommon for particular items to that have to be either clarified or supplemented once RIDE receives,
They come back.
and they come back with they will come back with a deficiency list, and they will say, please provide additional information on this particular item, which in that case we will then do so. But our preference is to submit on Friday the 14th.
Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Mr. Levis, did you want to speak to any questions from the public for Mr. Conti? I guess you're all set.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your work, and thank you for your guidance. It's really much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Conti.
And you can leave if you want. Out the back door. Okay. Moving back to item number 6, which is the RIDE professional learning requirements. It was our reference number 2. I'm not sure. Is Mr. Crawford going to do that?
Mr. Cowart, and you may call on a member of the audience to support him.
Okay.
Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an update, not a presentation. Nice and short. Educator certification regulations and requirements have changed in the state of Rhode Island. And in response to that, we have formed a small committee and a larger committee to plan out what regulations, what the certification requirements would look like in Coventry, along with what professional development would look like in Coventry. So we had a collaborative effort. There was 4 people in this small committee, and the work started at the end of last year and is carried into this year. You should have this in your packet, this brief overview. So it's myself, it's Kelly, it's Erin, and it's Sue Tuike. And what we've done is work together through every part of this process to try to make it clear and crisp and easy to understand so that our educators can get recertified or certified. But the other part of it is it's very much about what professional development is going to look like in our district, which is aligned to our strategic plan. So starting now, January 2020, professional learning is required as part of their renewal for educator certification. And I'm one of the people who's doing 2020. So for me, it's now. And Kelly's one of these people, as one of the people as well. So what the state has done is they've identified ways to get certified. And what they've done is created something they call PLUs, which are professional learning units. And teachers, educators are required to have a certain number of PLUs to get certified. And in your list, and I'll read these off, are some examples of how you would translate a PLU. So if somebody does 1 hour of professional development, that would equal 1 PLU. If somebody were to take a college course, each credit of that college course would equal 15 PLUs. If they did some sort of demonstrated some kind of competency, it could be 5 to 10. If they got national board certification, one component of national board certification is 45. If they complete the national board certification process, it's 180, and then renewal is 90. So that kind of gives you some examples of what professional learning units look like and translate into. For most of us in the district, for many people, it's by hour, because most of the professional development that's being delivered by us is in an hourly format. It's not really a course, even though there are many people in our district who are involved with national board certification, either initial completion of national boards or renewal. I also put in there, I'm not gonna read it, but one of the very first things we did when we laid out this process around professional development is defining what high quality professional development means to us as a district. We didn't wordsmith this together. We really took a lot of this from Department of Ed and from the regulations that came out, and we laid it out as a kind of a guiding principle, a guiding vision for professional learning. So at any point we got stuck in the mud and trying to figure out if something counts as a PLU, because there's a lot of conversations about that. I did this, does it count? A lot of times what we'll do is reflect back on what we defined as high quality professional development, and if it doesn't meet that definition, then often the response is, I'm sorry, it does not count. If it meets that definition, then we're usually very comfortable moving forward and giving somebody credit for those professional learning units. This next section is the most important section to me because I wanted you to know what we've done up to this point to get teachers in the right place, and we did a lot even today in terms of getting certified, but also how we're going to start building and visioning professional development for the district. So I'm just going to read the list, but I'll speak to some of them specifically. So one of the first requirements Department of Ed gives us is to create a learning plan. Kelly and Sue were very much involved with the formation of the regulations because as union representatives, they were involved in the negotiations and the conversations around what the breakout would be for PLUs. So they had a firm understanding of what that professional learning plan would be. And we sat down and they started it, and then we kind of crafted it together. And so it's kind of a simple but guiding document, and it's required. That basically says, here is our plan for professional learning. And then we formed 2 work groups. The first one is the one I talked about before, which is the much smaller group that does sort of the nitty-gritty definition, push and pull conversations, but we also formed a bigger group which has representatives from every level, teachers and support staff and administrators, so that when we get to the point where we're making big decisions, it's not being made by a very small group of people behind a closed door, but it's being made by the people who are going for certification and participating in professional learning, so that those people can have some say in what it looks like for us as a district. And that's really very important for us. We had a number of training opportunities for staff. So we had 3 voluntary meetings with teachers and administrators, often had over 100 people in attendance, standing room only, to explain to people what we have done in Coventry. And, you know, maybe people say this too often, but I truly believe that we're in the forefront of this work. And I know this because people have been approaching us almost from the very beginning about sharing out what we're doing, because a lot of districts are behind the 8 ball. I know for sure some districts don't have the mechanisms built that we have, and that educators are now looking to get recertified starting now this month, and other districts don't have anything in place to really verify those PLUs. We're well beyond that. But we also did drop-in sessions, and we actually did 2 today for elementary and secondary teachers, for them to bring their verification forms so that we can make sure they're filled out correctly and get some signatures and stamp them in, so that people can feel confident that the process is moving forward. And I could talk a little bit about what it looks like, even though I don't think it's on the list, but as a school department, our responsibility is to verify they did the PD. The principals have to verify for each individual teacher and look at the evidence and sign off, and the teacher is required to maintain a file of their evidence, so that if the state decides to audit an individual, the individual has to be the one to show the evidence of the work that they've done. It's not going to be our responsibility to show evidence, but it is our responsibility to verify that the work was done. And so we have a mechanism where we will literally check off teachers' names and submit them as they finish. And once we do that, then the educators can go into the certification website and apply for recert. They can't do that until we verify it and check it off. So if they try to go in, like I haven't signed off on anybody yet. So if any teacher right now goes in to recertify, they're gonna get a message that says it has not been verified yet. So it's a pretty strict process. On this particular screen is the website, and under the staff tab is everything I'm talking about tonight. So if at any point anybody in the district or outside the district, because we get people looking at our stuff all the time, if they want to, they can see our verification form, they can see our PowerPoint presentation, they can see all the documentation we've created, they can see everything. And this is an excellent resource for our teachers, and they go to it often. At any given point, because many of these documents are Google documents, and with a Google document, you can see people who are on the page. At any given point, any time of day, I'll go onto a document just to print it, and I'll see 6, 5, 10 people are on the document at that moment, either printing it or looking at it or reviewing it. So that's all important. I already talked about defining high quality professional development. I talked about what counts for PLUs in terms of that definition. We came up with an approval and a record-keeping process for professional learning units, and how we track, submit, and verify, which I kind of talked about a little bit earlier, which is important. We're trying to streamline the PLU process with other district PD requirements and initiatives. So when we think about PD, whether it's the building level or the district level, we want to be thinking all the way through that process in terms of identifying the PD, planning for the PD, but also thinking about what the teachers need, not only for their learning, but for them to be able to track and keep track of what they have. So we're building everything in from certificates. So when somebody completes something, there's a certificate they can get, so it's something they can hold. We have exit slips, which are actually built into a Google form where somebody would complete an exit slip. It also helps us keep track of who was where and when, but it also gives us some feedback on their professional learning so that we can use that data to create other professional learning opportunities. So that's all built into what we've created. We have an approval process, because at this point, we've already had a number of educators, most of them teachers, saying, I'd like to provide professional learning, I'd like to lead it, and here's my idea. And we wanted to make sure that that was a process that was very clear and predictable, so we created an approval process. There's an application, and when they go to the application, which you can click on that website, it basically says, how is this work that you want to lead? How is it high quality? How is it aligned to our strategic plan? There's a number of questions they have to answer, and if it's approved, here's a checklist of things that you have to do to make sure that A, you deliver the professional development, but B, to make sure that people have the documentation they need to prove they participated down the line. So a lot of that was already created and thought through. I already talked about the exit tickets. I talked about the certificates. And then the last thing that we're working on, we're nowhere near done, but we're working on, is a lot of what we're have on this site and a lot of what we've built is very paper-based, which is fine in the interim because we needed to get up fast. And a lot of times when you need to get up fast, paper's the way to go. But we know long-term, that's not going to be the solution because there's too many people in this district. There's too many things going on. People's certification is for 5 years. And as soon as they start their new 5-year cycle, they're going to start collecting for their next certification. It's just very cumbersome to think that everybody's going to keep track of everything with a piece of paper. So we are working with West Warwick. We've had a few conversations. We're going to have an face-to-face meeting to try to see if we can build the PD module into Aspen so that everything I just described to you would be in Aspen. And everything would be a course, like a college registration. Everything would be a course. People would register for a course. It would identify how many PLUs the course is worth, when it takes place, who's running it, and then there would be an opportunity for us to verify that somebody was there and participated because there's like an attendance component. And once that's built, which by the way, there's no cost to that because that is actually a part of the Aspen program we have. We just haven't accessed it before. Once that's built, then we'll transition over to something else. Ms. Aronakis, did I miss anything?
I just want to add that this is for everyone. So the superintendent has to do it, Ms. Andres has to do it, Mr. Coward has to do it, every building principal has to do it. So it's certification for any educator. So that's top to bottom. So that's good. I also think it's a good thing because it's aligned to even things that we discuss. You know, we always say for kids, it's not a one size fits all. Everybody comes to it at a different point. Same thing with teachers. I've been teaching for 25 years, and you know, Fred's been teaching for 2 years. Maybe not Fred, that's okay. So to have the same piece delivered to all of us the same way is it's outdated and it's useless. So this allows for administration to look at what they believe teachers really need, in addition to look at teachers say what they really need. And there's the thing I think I dislike the most. Sometimes it's cost prohibitive. We have to complete 100 hours.
I see.
So it makes what's in our contract null and void because it's 100 hours. So sometimes if the district isn't working with us and doing the right thing by giving us some offerings, and the unions are giving some offerings, the AFT, ERU is very successful. It's nice to see now that all parties are working together to offer differentiated, valued, engaging, hands-on professional development that can be easily transmitted to the classroom. So I think although it has its downsides, I think it's good, and I will just echo what Don says. I meet with all union leaders every month, so your second meeting is why I'm never here. And every single one of them knows that we're doing it and asks, what is Congress doing? Can we borrow your forms? There are several districts in the AFT, NEA is worse, but several districts in the AFT where their teachers don't even know this yet. So what happens, a regulation is passed, and RIDE doesn't publish, it was 217 pages long. We read the entire document, all 217 pages to create this, but there are districts whose teachers, whose certificates are expiring like ours are in August of this year, and they have no idea that they need to submit just for this year 15 to 20, depending on what they call in PLUs. Wow. So I do want to say kudos to the team. We've done a ton of stuff really with not much lag time because RIDE passes effective immediately. So we've literally had 8 months to do everything we've done. So just kudos to the team for working so well together, working so hard, and it's nice to know that everybody's like result oriented. Produce, get it done well. So,
Yeah, and to kind of echo that, every piece of paper that is on that website was hours and hours of work, not, typing. I'm talking about us debating, arguing, challenging each other's thinking, really going back and forth. And when we couldn't settle something, going back into the regs, finding the page, reading it, interpreting what it means. But that's really good work. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And that sets our teachers up for success because now we put the thought behind it instead of just hurry up and trying to throw something together and cross our fingers and hope that it works.
So are there webinars that so they can do some things online?
Yeah, so here's where it's a little bit different. Maybe I want to make sure I'm clear on this. The way the regulation is written is the majority of the work lands on the school department. It lands on us. So RIDE was really good about creating what they created, but they basically said the responsibility is shifted And the backstory to this, and many of us in the room experienced this, is a number of years back for recertification, you had to do an I-plan. And an I-plan was sort of a portfolio of your work. And I know my I-plan that I submitted was a binder, and it was probably this thick. And it's sitting up at RIDE someplace. And what RIDE discovered very quickly is they had no mechanism to check, monitor, approve I-plans, and so they just phased it out. There was only 2 years of people who really had to use the I-plan to get certified. I was one of them. But they realized they couldn't do it. So when RIDE came up with this, they took that idea of an I-plan in terms of collecting your professional development, but they shifted all of the materials and verification portion of it to the locals. So it's all on us. So all the webinars that RIDE has created are really just about the regulations, how many PLUs you need, because I think Kelly mentioned it, it's a phase-in. So for some of us, I only had, Kelly and I, who are 2020 people, and there's probably other people in the room, we had a very short amount of time to collect PLUs. So RIDE said, for you people, 2020, you only need 15. But then for the 2021 people, you need a little bit more. But nobody in Rhode Island is gonna need the full 100 PLUs in a 5-year plan until it cycles over. So there's a slow build out, it's a rollout. So yes, there's resources available, but it doesn't really help us in terms, tell me if I'm wrong, Kelly, in building this. All it just says is, here's the regulations, good luck.
217 pages, you figure it out. It's mandated, it's law, it's regulated, and your district has to tell us how you're going to accomplish it.
Right.
So that was everything that we built, we built.
So the professional development, the PLUs that you find and do, they don't all have to be in this district, or do they?
They don't
And-
have to.
Yeah, so but you just have to verify that you've gone to another district and done something. And I guess my question about the online stuff is there online, and who would figure out whether or not the online webinar that someone did,
That's us.
that's you?
That's some of the
So-
stuff that we debate and go back and forth on, because, you know, there are webinars out there that are probably very, very useful to somebody's
some that aren't,
growth and what they do for their students and their pedagogy, and there's some that are not.
Right.
And so we try to differentiate between those. Many of the high-quality ones provide the participant with some sort of certificate or exit quiz or something to prove
prove they
their learning, and those would count. If they don't have that, you know, then we have a conversation, and many times we'll say, I'm sorry, it doesn't. A TED Talk is a good example. I enjoy TED Talks. A lot of people enjoy a TED Talk, but, you know, even though for their 6 hours in the contract, teachers can get PD for a TED Talk, in terms of the definition of high quality that we're using here, we've said no, because it's a passive experience, and sometimes we don't know if people are getting out of it what we ultimately want people to get with high quality professional development.
And I only had one other question, and that was on this one demonstrated competency to be determined by RIDE. What's that?
I'm not even sure if I know what that is. Have they said that yet?
That's the thing they just came out with. So again, everything.
Seat of the
so people
pants.
like us that certification were up, they haven't even finished it, said you better have it done. Who the heck am I doing?
Yeah,
The demonstrated
okay.
competencies are, I'm gonna say something like ELL. So RIDE has rolled out a new ELL, I'm gonna say series of courses. If you complete that coursework, that is demonstrated competency. They also have, what is it called, micro-credentials. So I don't know if you've heard of micro-credentials, RIDE's rolling those out. They're looking at them. But to go back to your question, Kathy, is something you offer in your district, that would be utterly impossible.
Yeah, okay.
You have just teachers alone, 452 of us.
I know, yeah.
And if everybody needs 100, I definitely don't need what Paula needs, Paula doesn't need what Fred needs,
I
right? You
know.
know what I mean? You couldn't possibly differentiate. So that's why you can go to other places.
Okay.
You can go to the union's office that recruit. You can go to other school districts that
Right.
recruit. You can take college coursework.
Mhm.
So this, but again, in a way that's good, because the district can say, hey, Cal, here's your evaluation, and it seems that you struggled a little bit in this domain. These are things I would help you. And on the same token, I can say, my boss didn't catch this, but I feel like I need work here, so I'm going to do this, or I enjoy this, I want to learn more about it. So I think it has that good balance of give and take that, in my opinion, is finally differentiated. We're not hoarding 400 teachers in an auditorium to tell us all the same thing, but half of us don't need to hear it.
And RIDE created a vendor list. I was on the committee that gave them feedback on it, and so they took almost like an open bidding process, and they had different vendors say, if you were to provide professional development, what would it look like and describe it. And then they had a vetting system to vet out the ones that they thought were good vendors and ones that they did not. And the ones that met their criteria, they actually created a vendor list. So if somebody wanted to take advantage of that, they could. And everybody's on board now with certificates because they know everybody's looking for their proof. So, you know, even when I go to something during the day and it's 2 hours, often when I'm walking out, somebody's giving me a certificate. So, any other questions?
Dave, any comments, questions for Don?
No?
You good? Luke?
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Luke?
First, thanks for all the work to the entire project team, because it sounds like a heavy lift and we're well ahead of the curve. So kudos to you and the team. I wish you could come to my work and set up professional development. No, the only thing I have is there anything that is in the future as far as, or is there a central resource, like almost like a college course listing, where you can go on as a teacher and say, all right, listen, I want to focus on these core areas, aggregate every sort of opportunity within this zone so I can, you know, go for that professional development? Or is that something, because it sounds like RIDE has kind of abdicated their role here, so I guess we can't count on them to,
That's up to the user to find
yeah.
those options. But I will say, to answer your question in a different way, we were even talking today about pivoting a little bit, now that we've worked a lot of this out, to really thinking about getting the data around what people want and need and what's aligned to our strategic plan and our district initiatives, and creating a more robust system for our people to find what they need here. Because even though, and we just talked about people going anywhere they want, and they surely could, but if we have a captive audience of people who need PLUs and we have initiatives that we're trying to move, and people are interested in learning about those things, we should work really hard to make sure we provide them for people. So that's something we're trying to do ourselves. We've done surveys, we've actually have a few years of surveys where we can go through data. We have tons of test data. So there's places where we can try to start to build something. So as much as this was about, in my mind, the changes to the regulations about certification, it's as much, if not more, about what professional learning is going to look like in our district going forward. Because a lot of times it's been piecemeal, or it's been very localized to a building, and this allows us to kind of broaden that out. And now we have committees of people to work on this together. And so I think it's kind of exciting, the next phase, because now we're really going to be able to work on the professional learning, because all of the heavy lifting here is pretty much all set.
Well, it sounds like the legislation, although it's a burden, has got you all thinking about professional development and district thinking. So it's just, that's a positive thing. So
Agreed.
Thanks again for your efforts.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the committee members and everybody who's worked on this. Looks like it was a huge project and will continue to be a huge project.
It will. Thanks.
Any questions from the public for Mr. Cowett? Anything from you, Mr. Levis?
Yeah, I just want to say, I asked Don, just like a couple days ago, there's a lot of things that we need to keep bringing forward, but I just think it's important for two reasons to bring this to the community, just to see that there's still, sometimes you hear rhetoric about, you know, teachers doing this or administrators doing this and, you know, working X number of hours, summers off. And I think if people understand not only what the responsibility of educators is in terms of the day in and day out of classrooms, or administrators in terms of buildings and just the areas of responsibility, but then in addition, this type of responsibility. And I think what's crucial is that how our community, our school community works together. You know, how Mr. Cowett's working with our educators. These are not top-down initiatives. In fact, you know, a lot of the expertise that's brought to the table in our district comes from our educators. You know, they come with their ideas, and then, you know, any of us that are working with them, we help facilitate. But I think that's important for the community to see. And I think, you know, when we're talking about the regulations and the changes, I think it was last school committee meeting when Mrs. Aronakis came up and talked about, you know, she attends these meetings representing the whole AFT, saying that we're already doing this work. And I think this is just another example, because people work very, very hard. This is not, you know, I haven't had any involvement other than popping in when you guys are meeting. And they've met, probably I've seen you guys meet at least 15 times. And that's all that I've observed. But this is typical of the work. You know, I was there today at the high school when all the teachers and Kelly and Don and other individuals were helping facilitate. People concerned want to make sure they have the right documentation, that they get signed off. But people are passionate about the work that they do here, and I can't speak for other communities. I assume they have it, but I can speak for Coventry. And so that's why I think it's important, your 25-minute update. But I think it's important to bring that forward because this is just exemplary of all the work that goes on here, and I think it's really important for this community to understand that. So I appreciate the work that everybody does. But this is, like I said, this is not an outlier. This is the work that goes on here, whether it's curriculum work, any of the work that's being done. It's all about partnerships. And, I still get the sense sometimes people don't want that. They want us to butt heads, And my only question is why? This is the way it should be. It's a lot of work, but I just want to say thank you to everybody. But I want the community to really, and you guys to really see what's going on. And I know people appreciate it. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. I think my final comment, I've been on school committee now, 17 years, I guess. And I go to a lot of our association meetings where I ask, and when I hear from other communities, and especially with things like this or anything that's new and people are trying to solve problems, Coventry, I always feel proud to be a member of this committee because we seem to be, ahead of everyone. So it's not a surprise to hear that. I've heard it ever since I originally started going to those meetings, that Coventry has that reputation of a community of teachers that are movers and shakers and actually do the regulations, the whole capstone, the whole electronic portfolios, our education requirements. I never felt that we wouldn't get it done. You guys have always gotten it done. And I can't say that about every communities. So again, my hat is off to you. So moving on to number 7, discussion and approval of public access defibrillation policy. First reading, it was our reference number 3. Today, we're just looking to dispense with the first reading. I don't know if anybody had any comments about it or questions before we. I had one, and I know that James isn't here, but on the second page, I guess my question is this: do we have a policy for when someone requires first aid? Because what jumped out at me when I read it was this sentence right here: within 24 hours of a medical event, for each requiring first aid of any type. So I was wondering why that was put in there, because most of this policy was about, an AED.
So I can get clarification. I mean, in our conversation, that didn't jump up. But what I can tell you is this was taking out of I think it's quoted down, the general,
Yeah.
right down here. I think
Exactly.
the general laws. So
I guess my question
I'll
would
get
be,
clarification.
I think that's fine to have it in there, but do we have a policy that requires reporting of any first aid and be more specific? guess
I don't
is
know
what
if
my-
we have. I can't tell you if we
Yeah.
have. I don't know. So I'll.
But if you could just, I'll
Sure,
let you
sure.
have that so you can.
Yep. Yep.
That was the only thing.
Yeah.
Because that kind of was like, wow. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll look into
Because
it.
first aid is very broad.
Yeah. I'll look into that.
So is there a motion to approve that we dispense the first reading?
You don't want a table?
No, we can dispense, I
Madam
think.
Chair, make a motion that to dispense with the first reading of the public access defibrillation PAD policy, JLCA as presented/amended.
Second the motion?
Any further comments concerns? Anything from the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
Can I just make one comment? I just wanted to thank, and I know they're not here, but this came to light through our school nurse teachers that it was brought to my attention around that we really didn't have a process around our. I'm not even going to say the word defibrillators.
I know, I was struggling with that word too, defibrillation.
So we didn't have a process. We had the last policy we had was written by Mr. Jim Aronakis, and so they brought it to our attention. And in fact, when we wrote the first draft of this, we sent it to them, and they had a lot of comment. They actually happened to have a meeting in the special ed director, Mr. Wilson's office, and so they were a big part of this. And now we've actually leasing these through a company that'll come in once a year to make sure that all the batteries are working And, you know, the key to this policy, it has a process in terms of how people, even though our policy's not supposed to be procedure, we built some of those responsibilities in here. So I think I want to thank them for putting, you know, really bringing this to our attention, but then really taking ownership of this, you know, because these, obviously, this is something that's so crucial. And they're not just, our schools aren't just used during the day. We have many people using our schools. So we've actually relocated where these AEDs will be held. And so I wanted to thank them for that work.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do you know, so my final question is that there's a piece about if we have a sport event or something, have we always had someone that carried the defib?
So when we have events, when we have events in the field, we have a portable one. It's in Mr. Jones' office, and they bring those to the events, right?
I kind of
So,
figured
and
that.
when you go to an opposing team, they're all supposed
They
to
will
have
have it
them,
too.
so.
All right, great. Good. All right. I guess we can move on to number 8, which is the F-21 budget update.
So I'm going to actually take that unless somebody has a question. It'll be brief, but you have a
It's
memo.
just a memo, yeah.
So what I'm going to highlight, so the memo was on, basically on the 14th, you'll be getting, we'll be sending the budget to you with all the line items and give you time to look at it, to prepare for it, because on the 23rd, we'll be down there. We're going to have a workshop. It's going to be a long meeting. Just let me warn people. And so by the time your meeting's over, Mrs. Aronakis, you probably still have time to come here.
On the floor.
You'll still be able to come because we'll still be going on. In fact, we're going to have an executive session at the end of the meeting. So if you want to sit here in the audience and see us come out of it, you're welcome to do that too. But all kidding aside, so we'll have we'll have this to you on the 14th. But what I want to really stress is that, and we know it'll be a challenging year. We've said that, but I want to highlight that in my 4 years here, in 4 years of the budget, this is by far the most positive interaction, despite the challenges we're facing, that we've had with the town manager and the town finance director, Mr. Wazeker and Mr. Arnett. And I know they're not here, but I want to thank them. Obviously, I want to thank our staff, especially Miss Mangiarelli, because I think it's all about communication and transparency. And I know that's a overused cliche, but we've been meeting on a weekly basis. We'll continue to meet on a weekly basis. And I want to stress that we're really, we talk about being one community and one town, but we really are looking at what's in the best interest of this community, working together, give and take. And I'm very positive about the outcome of what we'll be presenting united to the school committee, but also to the council and to the taxpayers. So I just wanted to say that it's as challenging as that will be, and it is going to be challenging. I feel very, very positive about the working relationship that we've had. So I wanted to stress that. And that's it.
Thank you. Any follow-up comments or concerns from the school committee? Anything from the public? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to agenda number 10, which is the superintendent's report. So you're back on the stick.
Lose track of everything here. Anyways, I think I remember what's on there. So I want to start off by talking about there's a grant. It's called it's a safety grant put out by the can I have that? Yeah, just so I can read my. Thank you. There it is. Thank you. It's called the Stop School Violence Act grant, and we had applied for it. Mrs. Andrews had worked with the police department, and unfortunately, only one community in Rhode Island received it. It was Smithfield. So we're going to take that grant, work off of that, but I'm going to use Mr. Schwartz, who had helped us with the Rhode Island Foundation grant. He's agreed to help us, and also this gentleman, John Mattson, who does some work, was working with us, and he works with the Substance Abuse Task Force and to help us in terms of looking at regional, national, and local data. So we can apply for this. We can take that Secure Our City review that we had. We had this company come in that helped look at the police station and looked at our low voltage systems, such as the cameras, our intercom systems, radios, and things that, even locking doors. So we can apply for up to, I think it's $450,000, $500,000. So we're going to write that, and hopefully, with some of this help, maybe we'll submit that. And that brings me to the other part, is about a grant writer. I had met with Mr. Ritchie actually a few weeks ago, and one of the questions was around his. They have a grant writer. They had hired a 3-day-a-week grant writer. So we have the job description. We considered maybe looking at getting a 2-day-a-week grant writer, but I think based on our financial situation and what we're facing, we recognize that we need somebody that can help support that. But right now I've asked for the support from Mr. Schwartz. But at some point, we may decide to go out to bid and look for more like a per diem type of grant writer that can work on projects. I had a conversation with some individuals today, and they were talking about maybe collaborating with the town, because maybe if the town and the schools came together to look and say if we could get, even if we got a part-time that would support both entities, maybe that was something that we could put forward. I haven't had a conversation with the town manager or the finance director about that, so it's just an idea. But I think it's important we recognize that we spend a lot of time. I know I'm definitely not a grant writer. We spend a lot of time working on grants, but we know there are people who are experts. And private schools, we look at the Hendrickens, LaSalle's, and they have directors of development. And I think we need to start thinking more like that. So it's something that we're serious about. We're going to find a way to do it. Obviously, you'll be part of that decision making. But I just wanted to stress that again, that despite what's going on, what we're facing, we need to find other ways of creating revenue and bringing resources to us. The next item I want to talk about was just the changes in the SRO. So Mr. Nickerson that came before us at the middle school, he's moved to the high school. And at a future school committee meeting, I'll bring forward. So at the middle school right now, we have Officer A.J. Medeiros. And he was 2018 Community Police Officer of the Year for the state. So he's an incredible, if you've watched any of the police videos, he's front and center. I met with him today over at the middle school, and he's just in my brief conversation, he's very supportive, wants to be there, wants to be engaged in that school community. He was talking about his, flexibility. He's going to be involved, present at, outside events, not just during the school hours. And, that's the type of individuals that we've been fortunate to have. And I was concerned when Officer Pacheco was going to be a detective. I mean, I'm happy for him, but it's a great loss for the high school. But Officer Nickerson is a great SRO. He's done a great job in a short period of time at the middle school, but I was concerned that he's leaving, who we're going to get the middle school. But when I found out it was Officer Medeiros, I think it's just, again, another perfect fit. So we're very fortunate with that. Something I also want to say was that I am going to bring forward at probably our last school committee meeting in February. I'd like to recognize Colonel McDonald from the police department. He'll probably, I don't know if he'll still be the chief at that time, but I reached out to him, and I'd like to do something where we recognize him. I mean, he's been a true supporter of community policing. He's been there, and that's been a priority, and I think he's really had a great impact on our school community. So I'd like to recognize him in the beginning, and then present him with something from the committee and from the school department, and then maybe take a break. I'd like to have like the culinary arts people, maybe have pastry and some coffee or beverage, and we can just take like a 15-minute break. I'll invite his family, invite the council. And I think it's important to recognize what he's meant to, at least since I've been here, in terms of his support of all of our schools. I mean, he identified a police liaison for each of our elementary schools. And he didn't have to do that, but he's been very, very supportive. And I think, I appreciate he's going to be a great loss to me. I know he's always available. He's always communicating with me, giving me a heads up if he hears about anything going on. Just wants to make sure that I'm in the loop. And I can't thank him enough. So that'll be coming at our last meeting. And then the last thing I have is just that I had met with a couple of individuals from the Coventry Land Trust, and they were looking at a 100-acre plot of land that's connected to Washington Oak. and there's nothing definite now. It's all landlocked. But they were thinking of looking at buying it, and if that's going to come to fruition, they will come before the school committee and talk about any questions, concerns. Because right now, the only point of access would be through Washington Oak. It would be connected, and depending on whether it's just open space, but sometimes they want to put walking trails in these, so there may be some access. I told them, if that does come to fruition, we'll have a conversation. My only concern would be like increased supervision, maybe putting cameras on our building. But I think, open space, I mean, people think of Coventry, and that's what you think of. And to have another 100-acre plot of, land, again, that's just my opinion. But I just want to make you aware, and I might have done it in a memo, but I want to make you aware that, we had one meeting, and that was just, they were just giving, want to know what my thoughts were as superintendent. And I told them, that, we would have to bring it before you, and then before they went, then they'd go to the council, because they're sure the council would want to make sure they talk to the school. So I just want to make you aware of that. But I think, I applaud what they're trying to do. So that's it. Yes. So I just wanted to, the other thing is that I had mentioned just before Mr. Ritchie, and I know Lori worked with him for many, many years. But I know I first met him when we went to it was a professional development for the school administrators, and Lori and myself went, and I met Mr. Ritchie. He was there with his assistant, Jane Daly, and, John Anderson that works with us. It's very close. He represents. And he, I know he had, I didn't know, it's sad, I didn't know, unfortunately, that I knew he was a principal here, but I didn't know he was here for 14 years. That's a long period of time. For me, he was just somebody that, anybody knows me well, I hope, I'm not a company person. I kind of have my own thoughts, and I appreciate Mr. Ritchie, because a lot of times, I'd go to certain meetings or RISA meetings, and just my own opinion. Sometimes I feel like, there's this company line, and I always felt, I listened to Mr. Ritchie, and he wasn't afraid to go against the grain. And so a lot of times when I have thinking like that, Mr. Anderson connected me with him, and he was very, very supportive in terms of the ideas. And like I said, I hadn't met with him many times. I think people know that he had a significant brain tumor 18 months ago. And, I met with him for lunch, really to look at the whole director of development and talk to him about that. That was just a few weeks ago. And, he's just very, very smart man, had a lot of insight on budgets, on anything that I had a question for. And again, I know that when I went to the wake, there was many, many people there, but I saw many of our staff, many people had mentioned, I saw many of our teachers that had him and, in line, and they were passing as they were leaving, telling me about their experience and what they had learned. And so I think, again, I can only speak for myself in the short time that I've known him, but, I think he was and they taught, everybody spoke about it, that, whatever you thought about an individual, that his focus was always on kids. And I think that's something I've always tried to learn from, to keep that laser beam focus. When you're making a decision, whether people agree or not, if to keep in that focus is on students, then, stay the course. And that's something I learned to him. So I think, it's an understatement to say it's obviously he's a great loss, but I think he was an amazing educator. And, you can't argue with the results that they've had if you look at the history of Charahoe, and he's a big part of it. So it is a huge loss, and I just wanted to, acknowledge, the role that he played for a short period of time, but just an incredible individual. Like I said, there are people that know much better than I do, but I think it's important just to acknowledge that he played a big role in Coventry for many, many years too.
I think I was extremely saddened by his passing and by his medical predicament a year and a half ago. He was the principal of my daughter's school when my daughter graduated from elementary. And for me personally, when I was one of the reasons why I'm sitting here before you today as an elected official, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. My daughter was probably in first grade, and I volunteered to do something for the Weston Coventry PTA. And one of the things I volunteered to was to be on the nominations committee to try to find the new up-and-coming president for the PTA. And so I met with Barry and I said, you know the parents way more than I do. Who are good people that I could maybe try to elicit to kind of come and do this, job as a PTA president and the whole board? And so he gave me some names and he said, if you can't find someone, you can be president. And I said, just let me, if you can you promise me you'll take it on? And I said, well, first of all, I can't nominate myself, but, especially if I'm on the committee. But he said, why not? And I was very old school in the sense that I thought, you basically had to be the secretary first and then move up to, a VP and then maybe finally a president. And he said, no, I'll give you a year and I think you can become president. And so after that experience, came president of the council. And as president of the council, I kept telling all of our PTAs, you guys have to go to school committee meetings and town council meetings and be involved and know what's going on. And then I went to school committee meetings and said, I think I need to run for a political office. So in some ways, he was one of those people that encouraged me to do that. And my experience with him is that he absolutely, positively loved the Weston Coventry community. And he was a good man. And he was caring. And on another personal note, while I was president of the PTA is when I decided that I could no longer live with my now ex-husband. And so I was going through a divorce and I went to a PTA meeting and basically said to the people at the table that my telephone number was changing and I wasn't sure. I wanted to give them the new telephone number and literally everybody's head went down because nobody wanted to look up because they were so mortified that somehow I was getting divorced. And Barry was at the meeting and he said, we will support you in any way we can. We're here for you. So for me personally, he was an amazing and wonderful person. So I figured I had to say that. That being said, are there any citizens' comments? I don't see any. So I guess we can schedule the next meeting. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the next meeting of the school committee be scheduled for Thursday, January 23rd, 2020, at 7 p.m. at Coventry Town Hall.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes on. Motion carries 3-0. Moving on to, is there a motion to adjourn? And I have 8:06.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that the meeting be adjourned at 8:06 p.m.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair.